All right, so welcome everybody to our annual California Clean Voting Network meeting. My name is Vivian Matuk, and I'm the Environmental Voting Program Manager for both the California State Parks and the California Coastal Commission. We usually conduct this meeting on an annual basis. And I wanted to tell you how we operate and how we select the topics that you will be learning about today. Basically, every year during this time of the year, we conduct these free educational meetings. And after the training or the workshop or the meeting, as it will happen today, you're going to receive an evaluation form where we're going to be asking you a couple of things about our speakers, the topics, etc. But at the end, we're going to be asking you also about other topics that you may want us to bring in the future, because the goal of this group is to be able to bring experts to you so you can ask questions directly, of course, in a respectful way, because we are adults, right? And the way that we selected, again, the topics was based on previous years, but also as part of the program that I manage and other partnership we have the opportunity to talk to voters all over the state and attend a lot of meetings and conduct a lot of education and outreach opportunities where we also learn about topics or questions that the public may have, misunderstandings, or need more information about. So that's how we put together these educational meetings. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to quickly go over some protocols to participate in this great meeting. So I'm setting up some of the ground rules there. We want everybody to have the opportunity to participate. So make sure that that happens. I'm going to keep everybody muted, not because I don't want to hear your beautiful voices, but it's because sometimes these systems tend to create a lot of background noise. So we want to avoid that. Please only ask questions when we ask you to do so. As you saw in the agenda, we have allocated time after each speaker, so you can ask as many questions as you want. We prefer not to get the questions while the speaker is talking, because sometimes the speaker is going to be covering your question in the next slide or in the next minute, so that kind of interferes with the process of the presentation. Of course, exercise respectful listening, and everybody is encouraged to participate and, of course, be present. We want everybody, if possible, and if your internet system or signal allows that, to have your cameras on. Why is that? Is because in that way we can make it more personable. It's easier for us just to lose sometimes attention, because we love to multitask, but we all know that our brain is not designed for multitasking. So if you're here, let's be here. And let me stop here for a sec so I can allow the people in the waiting room to join. And I'm going to ask Kendall if you have the opportunity to help me while I talk, allowing people in the waiting room to join.
Sure thing.
Thank you. So for those of you who are not very familiar with virtual meetings, even though all of us kind of are at this point, you will see yourself on the screen or in the Zoom system. Make sure that your icon for the camera is without the diagonal red light. That means that you are being seen by all of us. Again, I mentioned to you, we don't want to use right now the microphone, because that will, no worries. And some of you don't have a camera, so no worries about that. I totally get it. You will be muted, but of course you have the opportunity to unmute yourself by clicking on top of the microphone icon, or if you're calling in, you can use the *6 to unmute and the same to mute yourself. When to ask questions, again, we will be going over the agenda in some few minutes. You already received it. We have allocated the time, so make sure that you unmute yourself. When you unmute yourself, please identify yourself, and then we can take your question, or you can also use the chat function. Tend to use the chat only during the question, so we don't distract the speaker, because sometimes it's like, oh my God, am I saying something that people are confused? So it's better just to use the chat when we ask the questions. Or if you want to raise your hand, I can just check and make sure that you have the opportunity to ask questions. All right, so let's see who is here with us today. So before our meeting, what I did was I went to our registration system, and I created this map to show you how amazingly well represented California is today here with all of you. So we have people from all the counties you can see there. Some of them, just to give you examples, we have from Shasta all the way to San Diego, but we also have people from beautiful central part of the state, Fresno, El Dorado. We also have people on the coast, San Bernardino, and we even have somebody from outside of the state. So whoever is from Nevada, welcome. But of course, we also have people from Nevada County, and we also have San Luis Obispo, the coast, among others. In terms of your organization or, and Washington State, thank you so much for saying that. We also have Washington State, so that's fantastic. In terms of organizations or background, we have amazing participation, pretty diverse. We have people from marinas, yacht clubs, boaters, boating associations, like we have representative from Recreational Boaters of California. We also have members from different northern and southern and central yacht clubs. Also, we have members from the Southern California Yachting Association. We also have the Pacific Inter-Yachting Association, Recreational Boaters of California, Boat US. We also have our partners with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, the American Boating Club, or the Power Squadrons, members of the public, nonprofits, including the Orange County Keepers. We have some boaters and members from the general public, some of our partner dock walkers joining, National Women Sailing Association, the Channel Island Women Sailing Association, the Youth for Change. Oh my gosh, it's just like a lot of people from all over the state. So thank you all for joining us. All right. Okay, so this is the agenda that you received. So after I go over some announcements, and I want to share with you some resources that we have created this year for all of you to take advantage of, then we're going to switch gears, and I'm going to introduce my colleague, Lydia Kenninson, an environmental scientist with the Division of Boating and Waterways, who's going to be talking about their effort as part of the program to control invasive species in the Delta and the southern tributaries. So that's fantastic. Also, then we're going to have a time for questions. Then we're going to switch gears, and we're going to welcome Brenda Ponton with the LA County Department of Beaches and Harbors. She's going to be talking about some of the overview of the copper pollution issue for bottom paints, alternatives to using copper anti-fouling paints, and some of the studies that's kind of applied to the entire state, but some of the studies they have been developing in Marina del Rey. Then we have the section for questions, and then we will be focusing our attention in the sewage world, and we're going to be welcoming our Clean Vessel Act grantees for both Northern and Southern California, Kendall Soriano with the Bay Foundation and Diana Fu with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, and they're going to be talking to us about basically the economic impact of sewage systems at marinas. Get excited, the first study in the nation that has analyzed that, which is exciting. And then how to influence voter behavior through community social marketing. Then we will have questions, and then we will be done with our presentation. All right, so couple of announcements. As I mentioned before, I wanted to share with all of you today, and I think you have seen this podcast already. We are working with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, as well as the Boating Safety Unit from the Division of Boating and Waterways, creating this new education and outreach tool to engage more with boaters, boating facility operators, and the general public, water enthusiasts. So please help us to spread the word out about this Dockside podcast. I just included in the chat the link, but you can listen to it in any of the platforms that you see in the blue box. And we have been able to include amazing topics for all of us, not only including about boating safety, but also plastic pollution, microplastics, the importance of marina operators, also shark research, and also how to navigate around our magnificent whales that visit off the coast of California without disturbing them. And we were super excited because we were even able to interview Captain Mary Rogers, who is a leader in women sailing and the Black community. And actually, she was one of the first Black women to be able to be a Commodore in one of the yacht clubs, probably around the nation. So please make sure you tune in, share this resource, link it to your website, etc. Also, I want to quickly tell you that this year we have a fantastic year for our Dock Walker program. Actually, we have a bunch of dock walkers joining us today. Dock walkers, for all of you or people who don't know what I'm talking about, this is a program that we implement with the Bay Foundation and also other partners across the state, including the Coast Guard Auxiliary and the Power Squadrons. Dock walkers are environmental educators who are trained by our program to conduct face-to-face boater education about clean and safe boating practices. California is the state that started this idea about having this program. This year, we conducted 14 virtual trainings and 3 in-person trainings, working with 176 partner dock walkers. And these are some dock walkers in action that we have all over the state. Once they are trained, they go out and meet boaters wherever they are, talk to them about clean boating, and distribute our main outreach tool, which is the California Boater Kit that you can see in this slide. Again, get excited. California was the first state in the nation creating this concept that now is found in many, many states thanks to our creativity. This year, we were able to develop and distributed 7,600 boater kits across the state. So for those partner dock walkers who are joining us today, thank you for your efforts. And during the face-to-face education, our partner dock walkers collect some information from boaters as part of these education that help us to better orient our education and outreach effort, and also to share new clean boating information with boaters. And we also wanted to share with you how fantastic the effort from dock walkers has been this year. This is a very geographically diverse map that shows the amazing work Partners Dock Walker conducted this year across the state. And we, of course, honor every year the most active dock walkers. This is the list of the top 22 dock walkers that were the most active this year. And as you can see, it's people from all over the state, from different backgrounds. We have actually one of the most active dock walkers joining us today. And I want just to say hi to Vita Colaco with the Pittsburgh Marina. She's right here, like waving at us, an amazing dock walker. Thank you so much for all you do. And for those of you who want to be part of this great community, we're starting our dock walker trainings next year around February. We will have our website ready for you soon. And I know some of you have been joining us from different parts of the state, and also wanted to share with you this new campaign that we are launching with the California Product Stewardship Council. And also we wanted just to mention that this is the first in the nation type of campaign. Later on, once we're done with the meeting, I'll be sending you the link to all of these different programs so you can have it in your inbox. And remember, we're also recording this meeting for those of us or some people who couldn't join us today. All right. Excellent. Let's see. So let me just stop the screen here. sharing the screen, and we're going to transition and start with the first presentation, which is from, again, my colleague Lydia Kenningson, who is with the Division of Boating and Waterways, and she's going to be covering the first item in the agenda, which is, again, the management of aquatic invasive species in California Delta and its southern tributaries. So welcome, Lydia, and the audience is all yours.
Thank you, Vivian. Let's see. Okay, can you all see my screen here?
Yeah, we can see it, and we can see your notes as well.
Let's see.
So I think you have to go to the three dots and then do what we identify.
Sure.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, let me see. Oops, I think I'm sharing the wrong one. Just one second.
No worries, take your time. Perfect.
Okay, let's get rid of the screen here. Just one second, I'm trying to find these. Did it go back to my notes?
No, we're seeing full screen.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hello, my name is Lydia Kennison, and I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present on behalf of the Division of Boating and Waterways Aquatic Invasive Plant Control Program. Sorry, I'll stop skipping around here. I've been an environmental scientist with the program for a few years now, and I'm looking forward to giving you an overview of our program, as well as sharing with you some of the things we've been working on and some of the results of that work. We will also talk about some of the things that we're planning for the future. So as many of you know, invasive aquatic plants are a threat because they crowd out native species, alter habitat through increased sedimentation, water clarity, and reduced flows. This causes warm, stagnant water, which is also a public health issue with mosquito infestations. They also crowd waterways, eliminating navigability and recreational activities. So to begin, I'm going to give you a little bit of the program's history that has brought us here today. DBW is authorized by Navigation Code, Harbors and Navigation Code 64, declaring Boating and Waterways as the lead agency to control and monitor aquatic invasive plants in the Delta. We started as a water hyacinth program in 1982 and grew as we were authorized to treat additional plants. AB 1540 in 2013 created a risk assessment process which authorized CDFW, Fish and Wildlife, to review and approve risk assessments from DBW while working with other state and federal partners instead of having to go through legislation. That was a helpful step to us in order to treat new invasive plants quickly, giving us an actual chance at eradication. And you could probably imagine how much time it took to wait for legislation to pass, only leaving us the opportunity for management instead of eradication. So since then, we've added Uruguay water primrose, alligator weed, coontail, fanwort, curly leaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, and ribbonweed. We receive our funding from the Harbors and Watercraft Revolving Fund, which receives revenue from tax on fuel to propel vessels, a portion of registration fees, licensing fees from yacht and boat sales, and interest and repayment of loans by local government. So as a lead agency, our aquatic invasive plant control program cooperates with local, state, and federal agencies to manage the invasive aquatic plants that are deemed a threat to the environment, economy, and public health. The goals of the program are to control the invasive aquatic plants through detection, identification and control efforts. As new aquatic invasive plants show up, eradication may be possible through collaborative efforts with other local, state, and federal agencies. One of the most important components of our program is EDRR, which is Early Detection, Rapid Response. And we've been doing a lot of work communicating new threats with each other and trying to be prepared for early possible invaders. Whoops. So here we have the project map for our program. You can see it's a huge area that spans a long distance through California. The dark blue waterways that you see represent an estimated about like 101,000 water acres. And we have approximately 30 treatment staff. So that'd be far too large of an undertaking for just our team. So we actually have help in Fresno and have recently began using the help of contractors for certain sites farther south. Right now, we're using their help for the Fresno-Mendota Canal, which is greatly impacted by water hyacinth. So along with the sheer amount of acres that we're responsible for, our program has a number of challenges, including managing the expectations of many stakeholders with limited resources and a ton of regulatory requirements. The Delta is a lifeline for much of our agriculture and is home to many special status species. So other challenges that we face are, varying conditions entering the year. This week we had a very high water year, and that actually caused a lot of river closures, which caused us to start our plans late. So that was definitely an obstacle. And also with the special status species present, we have certain restrictions to avoid treatment or certain herbicides. For example, in the spawning season of Delta smelt, we have to avoid areas and limit our tools. And we're also checking the trawl reports from Fish and Wildlife to avoid those areas that they're found. The Delta is a very complex system, and like I had mentioned, it has many stakeholders. Due to the presence of the special status species and other biologically important resources in the Delta, as I had mentioned, there's a lot of regulatory requirements this program must meet. For example, there's the Delta Plan, which ensures consistency with every programmatic biological opinion that we have with Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries Service. And there's our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, NPDES, that we gain from the State Water Resources Control Board that's required due to our use of herbicides in the water. And there's other CEQA NEPA processes which contain other documents and requires public meetings with every programmatic biological opinion that we submit. There's also the Lake and Stream Bed Alteration Agreement with Fish and Wildlife for mechanical harvesting and allows us to harvest under current authorizations. For our program, meeting those requirements usually consist of conducting species habitat assessments, creating impact reports, and regular water quality monitoring throughout the season. If you're interested in reviewing any of these regulatory documents, they're posted on our website, and I'll share that with you later at the end of the slideshow. So we use an integrated control strategy, meaning that we're using different methods of controlling the plants because there's no one right answer for every situation. Our primary method of control right now is herbicide treatments. Our crew will often use spray nozzle applications from their boat, but they also have backpack sprayers in instances where the water level is too shallow for the boat to access, or they need a more precise application. Mechanical harvesting is another one of our control methods. We try to avoid this if possible because it's high cost and it's high impact to the surroundings and the environment. But if the area is a high priority and the infestation is great enough, we have that option. In the bottom middle picture, you'll see us working with our federal partner from USDA. He is distributing plant hoppers into the hyacinth plants in that picture. They bore holes in the tissue and weaken the plant, and they also have larvae that tunnel into the stems. This type of biological control has been used all over the world to control water hyacinth. Physical removal is another option for control. We've done this in the past when it's safe in a manageable location. And in the near future, we might actually do some trials of diver-assisted suction removal for the submerged plants. It's very labor-intensive activity that requires special permits. Physical controls are things like booms, which could be used to physically keep floating plants out of the area or confine them for treatment. And I've seen a lot of marinas and private dock residents use booms to keep away plants from their property as well. Physical controls also include benthic mats and bubble curtains. So this slide is to give you a general overview on how our program is organized. We have the aquatic invasive plant control program as a whole, and from there we're split into 2 groups according to the plants we treat. Because of the different habitats and kind of growth patterns of the plants, we're separated into the submerged aquatic vegetation program and the floating aquatic vegetation program. This also allows us to gain a more in-depth expertise and focus on completing the regulatory requirements required for each type of plant. Another very important component of our program is our field operations. We have our field office located in Stockton, which is where we house our vessels and other treatment tools. There, our crews set up and are head out to conduct the treatments. They all go through annual training to keep their knowledge fresh on sensitive species, best management practices, and herbicide labels. It's our job as a scientist to make sure that they're informed on new issues and working within the regulatory requirements. So who benefits from our program? There are actually a lot of people and organizations who benefit from it. This figure shows some examples. We collaborate with other agencies such as Fish and Wildlife and DWR on their projects that need services for restoration projects or other needs of their program. We also provide clear waterways for agricultural water intakes, commercial ship navigation, and all kinds of recreational uses. Our top priority when using our fund is to keep the waterways clear for navigation and for recreational activities. So we've had some budget cuts come our way recently, and so we're kind of trying to get creative with ways that we can still get our work done and make sure that we use the funding for what it's for. So we've actually been able to start using contractors, which allows us to provide services for our collaborators and not take away from those funds set aside for the recreators. So results can be tricky, especially when you're considering that vast acreage of the Delta, but we've been making great headway in the success of our treatments, especially in the last few seasons. Results of a season, like I said, can be hard to quantify, but that's something that we work on every year, is how do we measure our overall success? And that's something we're constantly brainstorming, is the performance metrics. So it's also, since it's so hard to measure results over an entire area, to better analyze our overall results, skipping down here. I'm going to show you some results that we've gotten from specific projects and specific areas in the Delta. These results have come from improving our application techniques through herbicide selection and using tools we have to monitor individual sites. For the submerged plants, we rely heavily on hydroacoustic mapping, which gives us a visualization on the abundance of plants in the water column, so we can compare beginning of season results to end of season results, as well as results soon after treatment. For floating aquatic vegetation, I'm going to show you a couple of DISs we completed to inform us how to work smarter and also test new techniques to put into our toolbox. DISs are demonstration investigation zones. It sounds fancy, but they're just projects that we need to gain approval to actually do and then closely monitor to gain permission to add these new techniques and tools into our program. So this picture shows one of our sites called Delta Coves. I noticed there are some people joining from Contra Costa and San Joaquin, so I kind of wonder if they're familiar here. It's a newer developed waterfront community. They've been very proactive in communicating with us and trying to understand how they can help themselves, which has been really great. The color gradient that you see in the water shows us the amount of vegetation in the water column, blue being clear and red being full of vegetation. So originally our program was only allowed to use fluoridone to treat for invasive aquatic vegetation. But the waterways are so deep between the Delta Cove communities, it was hard to maintain the appropriate concentration. And you can see our use of fluoridone on the left. We have a pre-treatment map on the top and a post-treatment map on the bottom. And you can see that we were not really able to control the aquatic vegetation using fluoridone. Last year was the first year our program was able to use a different herbicide called Diquat to treat more sites. And we had to complete DISs to be able to get approved for that. And the result of that is that we were granted an increase of the allowed acres for Diquat treatment. We were able to only focus our treatments on the outer edges of the Delta Coves where it's shallow enough for the plants to grow, which is typically 10 feet or less. And here on the right, you can see after a couple of Diquat treatments, the plant biovolume decreased from 37% to 5%. Therefore, based on the specific dynamics of this area, Diquat was really a better option for Delta Coves, and it has proven to be so for many of our sites. So here, the text is a little small. I'm not sure if you guys can make it out, but my figure on my next slide will make it more clear. I'm showing you a DIS we completed to improve the efficacy of our treatment applications for floating aquatic vegetation, which was a tank mix. So we learned that a certain mix of herbicides together had much more efficacy in the treatment of Uruguay water primrose, which is the most prevalent of the invasive floating aquatic vegetation out in the Delta right now. We conducted quadrat studies of our herbicide effects on the primrose and also the effects of certain combination. Our tank mix shows the best results after continued monitoring. It combines 2 systemic herbicides, which over time lead to a more complete die-off, which is great because if there are parts of the plant left, they'll continue to grow when the water warms up next season. So here's just kind of another visualization of that tank mix study that I was showing you. You can see all the way on the right-hand side, so many months after treatment, that light blue line has the least amount of percent cover of plants in the area, and therefore we were able to tell that that was the most effective thing to use on these plants. And this is actually pictures of our drone treatment, another DIS that we did. So on the left, you'll see all of the pictures of the treatment site, and on the right, you'll see the pictures of the control site. And you can see the control site has little change, maybe a little bit more plant growth. But on the left side, where we conducted our drone treatments, you can see the reduction in plants and even some open water. So we believe that drone treatments will help us cover a large area to weaken plants and allow us to get our boats in the water better. We've been struggling to be effective in very large, heavily infested areas because we can only treat the area around the boat if the vegetation is too thick for us to push through it. Then we have to wait for it to die back before we come out again, and that usually takes about 2 weeks. So with the drone, you can complete a treatment throughout the whole area, weakening the plants and allowing for our boats to push through and treat the areas that still need it. Since this is a high-cost service and we're relatively inexperienced in doing it, our plan is to use a contractor to conduct these treatments. So as you can see through the DISs and data analysis, we're constantly trying to improve the way we do things. In addition to that, we have some things we're really looking forward to in the future. We're planning more DISs so we can start using some new physical controls. And we're going to actually be trying to use benthic mats, which will really help us control small areas of those submerged aquatic plants. But we're also planning to employ bubble curtains, which is pretty exciting because I think it will make our treatments a lot more effective. The bubble curtains just kind of has like a string of bubbles that basically will hold the concentration in for longer, which can be kind of challenging due to the tide and movement of the water. It's hard to get that contact time that you need on the plants. We also have some promising partnerships that are helping us gain important knowledge. Like right now, we're working with NASA and using satellite imagery to understand plant movement and growth rate and locating problem areas that our crews weren't aware of. And this is exciting work. We're currently working on the ground truthing their results. And like I've mentioned before, we have also started using a contractor which is helping us provide service to our collaborators while we focus on the mission of our program. And continued education is always important. I see a lot of dock walkers. I know you are all very familiar with how important that is. So through workshops and seminars, we continue to try and teach the public how to identify the plants we control for and the effects that invasive aquatic plants have. We also try to teach what you can do to help yourself, like hand pulling the plants. We are the only one allowed to do herbicide treatments or diversection removal, but people are able to hand pull the plants around their dock, leave them on the dock or on land to completely desiccate before they dispose of the waste. And then of course, there's the clean boating practices that help a lot. Clean, drain, dry, and also making sure that you remove all plant particles from your vessel as you're leaving a waterway. So I really enjoyed being with all of you here today, but I wanted to leave you with some resources. These are great resources to even pass along to those who you're spreading awareness to as well. You're all free to reach out to me with any questions through email. Another email, which is very important, is the aquatic invasive species email. If you're going to be handing an email to try and contact us to the general public or to those that you're talking to, this is the one that you want to give them. If you have any issues regarding invasive species, plants or otherwise, I also route the emails from here to any kind of zebra and quagga topics that you may have questions about. I can route them to the appropriate person. Here you can also submit complaints for your area on the Delta. I noticed those in the surrounding counties, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, those who are in the Delta, feel free to send an email to us if you're having a problem with the infestation or marina owners. We try to prioritize marina owners. So make sure you get a hold of us through that email. From there, I send them to the field operations and they use that to kind of prioritize and plan for the next treatment. So please also send coordinates and pictures if you're going to do that. And listed under that, we actually have a new app that you can put on your phone. It's called Delta 311. I don't know if any of you have heard of SeaClick Fix before, but it's very similar. This is where you can mark your location and report sightings of infestations of our plants. It will also give you information on how to identify our plants and give you an option to submit pictures with your submission. So our Boating and Waterways website is a great resource of information as well, and I encourage you all to check it out. There are great pictures and tips on how to identify the plants. I wish I could go over the plants with you, but there's not time, but we've got great pictures and pointers on how to identify the plants, so please check that out too. All right. Questions or comments?
Thank you, Lydia. And before we take the questions, a couple of things I wanted to highlight to all of you is I'm going to be including in the chat right now the link to the agenda in case you don't have access to it, so it's easier for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I'll be sending you an email with the contact information for each of the speaker who's joining us today. So easily for you, you can contact them, as well as some of these resources that Lydia is mentioning. So let's go ahead and take some questions. And I saw in the chat, I think that Tim, you have a question, so go ahead, please, and introduce yourself, and the audience is yours.
Yes, because can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, hello, my name's Tim Fontaine, the general manager at Village West Marina in Stockton in the San Joaquin, and also represent the Clean Marine programs as well. My question is, didn't discuss it today, but it's regarding the budget for this program specifically. We went and touched on the efficacy of the program. That's great to hear that there are more efficient ways of doing it. You're talking about bringing in contractors with the drones, etc. But what is the impact on the budget for 2024 for this program? And following that, how do we, as a group here of boaters, marina operators, whoever else is on this list as well, continue to make sure that the budget doesn't keep getting cut for this program? Because you can see specifically on your slides of how effective you have been with the program. So can you talk about if the budget's being cut and what we can do to combat that and make sure this program stays where it should?
Sure, that's a good question. With the budget cuts, I am not completely sure how we can kind of rally or write letters to prove how important our program is. I can get back to you on that. I can ask my supervisor. He's really well versed in that. But we did have our budget cut in half. It's pretty transparent, right? It's on the web. But what we are doing is making sure that we use funding for the intended purpose, is to help people like you who have marinas, and people, we really try and prioritize recreational activities. So with this contracting, the goal is to get the high expense activities like drone treatment, mechanical harvesting, like that, given to the contractor, and actually the collaborators that benefit from that pay for that directly. So it's not coming out of the fund that we're using to help marinas and boaters. Does that answer your question, or is there more?
Yeah, no, thank you. Can you, and you said it is public though, I can find it, but can you tell us what the budget was and what it got cut to? If you say it's
I am not 100% sure on those numbers, but I can send you the answer if you want to leave your email.
Yeah, and Lydia, let me just tell also to Tim, that could be a question, Tim, if you want to address to our Deputy Director, Ramona Fernandez, in case you have a specific questions, or also Lydia's supervisor, who knows more like the ins and outs about the budget. So we can share with you that email as well. And I think you have Ramona's email, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, I do. I appreciate you guys taking the time to answer that. So
no worries.
I will reach back out as well. But if for those as well listening, I just wanted to bring that up. So thank you. Thank you for.
No problem. Let's go to take another question. Cliff, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thanks, Vivian, and thank you very much, Lydia. That was a good presentation as far as the technical aspects of handling this big problem. I did notice in the presentation that, and this is following up a little bit on what Tim had to say, that the budget for this program comes entirely out of the Harbors and Watercraft Revolving Fund, which is funded by recreational boaters in its entirety in one form or another. and that the budget has been cut. Well, I also noticed in your presentation that the beneficiaries of your program, you actually didn't mention recreational boaters, although obviously recreational boaters do benefit, but you did mention several other stakeholders that benefited: environmental, economy, and so on. So my question is it possible for Boating and Waterways to obtain supplemental funding for their budget for this program from other sources beyond the Harbors and Watercraft Revolving Fund? We know that HWRF is impacted, but these other stakeholders that benefit from the program, surely they should be asked to contribute as well to the budget to make sure that we have a robust program here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And we're doing a lot of work trying to figure out other sources. So I showed you an example of Delta Coves, and actually they're having and they should benefit from us, but they're actually having part of their HOA fees fund their herbicide that we're going to use for their treatments. And when we do work now with other state agencies, we give the bill to them also. So we're really trying to just use that funding for its intended purpose for those who pay into the fund. But actually, we are really trying to figure out other sources of funding for our program right now to still get our work done.
Yeah, again, another work and direct question that can be addressed by our deputy director, who has been, of course, really leading this effort, as well as all the management with the aquatic invasive species prevention team. Cliff, do you have any other question, or we can move into Jim Asseltine question that I have in the chat?
No, that's all I had, Vivian. Thank you.
No, thank you. So Jim, Lydia is asking, does the state have any responsibility to keep lease parcels clear? We cannot access ours, blocked by Luriwiga.
So first of all, please send me an email with where you're at and everything. We try our best to keep these most important, the navigable waterways used by ships, but then also the areas that are used by recreators. But there are a lot of areas of water that we cannot access. So anything landlocked, we're not allowed to touch. And then also when the waterways become so narrow and shallow and socked in with the vegetation, we can't get our boats back there. So in that way, we are restricted to some things that we could treat.
So what are the avenues for physical removal? Because that's what would be necessary for our parcel.
Physical removal. So you are allowed to hand remove. I know infestations can be huge sometimes. So in that circumstance, if it is creating an issue, I know I've kind of routed people to kind of get in touch with their county officials. Maybe it's a hazardous situation, but I can also get you a couple more resources to reach out to. If you leave me your email in the chat, I'll make sure that I get you a couple of suggestions.
Yeah, that would be good, because where it's at is out in Dutch Slough, and it's a long ways from any land, so there's really no place for us to where it would dry out. So
yeah, Dutch Slough. So you're by Big Break, and yeah, if you send me an email, well, yeah, I'll talk to some people for you, see what we can do.
okay, thank you.
No
And
problem.
thank you, Lydia. If you can stop sharing your screen, please. And
Sure.
again, in the email, you will be getting all the speakers' contact information. So no worries about that. Just try to relax as much as possible so you can enjoy the presentation. And let's see, I don't see anybody else having a question. Thank you, Lydia, for great presentation, because it clears a lot of the conversations we have with voters or the general public. Sometimes they feel like, oh, you should come today to my backyard and just treat this. And there's so many issues that we need to take into account just to not violate a lot of the regulations we have to follow. So thank you so much. Again, I included in the chat the agenda for those of you who didn't get it, and we're switching gears. And now I'm going to be welcoming again Brenda Ponton with Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbors. She's going to be talking about, you know, some of the copper anti-fouling alternatives and other information. So Brenda, welcome. And I think you're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, awesome. Okay, am I sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
The right screen? Wonderful. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here today to talk about copper. My name is Brenda Ponton. I'm a project manager with Woodard & Curran, and we're a consulting firm that's been helping Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbors with their copper total maximum daily load program for about 9 years now. So I've been working very closely with the county every week on different initiatives that we could do to help reduce copper and address the problem that's particularly an issue in the Marina del Rey Harbor in Los Angeles County. So we'll be talking today about that issue and updates on reducing impacts from copper anti-fouling paints, and you know, some of the strategies that we've been implementing specifically in Marina del Rey. Go. A little preview of what we'll be discussing. The copper issue overview. I'll go over a little introduction for those of you that are not familiar with the issue with dissolved copper and what the sources and impacts are of that pollutant. And then discuss the regulatory compliance requirements, and particularly what's going on in Marina del Rey, as well as the copper reduction strategies that we've been attempting to implement in Marina del Rey, and some of the positive and not so positive impacts of those. And then I'll go into the non-biocide whole paint study in particular. And so this is one of our strategies and programs that we implemented in the past, and I'll share what that study was as well as the results of that study. And then we'll end on some other alternatives looking beyond just non-biocide whole paints, which is the focus of this presentation. Okay, so starting out with the copper pollution overview. Copper is one of the primary biocides used in anti-fouling paints. Anti-fouling paints are used on the bottom of boat hulls to reduce marine growth, and that in turn helps improve the boat speed and the fuel efficiency for boat owners in those marinas. Copper is the primary biocide, as I mentioned, and is used in most of the anti-fouling paints in California. There have been some alternatives proposed, and in the past, ships used tributyl tin, but that has been outlawed. As a biocide, it does have negative impacts in the marine environment, but that's also the way that it functions to reduce the marine growth on the boat hulls. The primary sources in marinas coming from the boat hull paint is that the copper is released both during passive leaching while those boats are docked at their slips, and that's keeping the fouling from happening when the boats are not being used, as well as the copper is released when the boat hulls are cleaned while in the water. So you can see an image there that's not copper in the water. That's actually a paint plume from cleaning a boat hull in the water. This is not allowed to create a paint plume, but when the hulls are cleaned by divers, a small amount of copper is released into the water, and that also helps reactivate the paint that's on the bottom of the boat. So it's part of its function. So because of this issue with copper coming out off the paints and into the waters, there have been many of the marinas in California and other areas of the world have issues with dissolved copper. So in the state of California, there are water quality standards set for dissolved copper that are set in the California Toxics Rule. The water quality standard under chronic conditions is 3.1 micrograms per liter, and under acute conditions, 4.8 micrograms per liter. And these regulations are set to help protect marine life, because high copper levels are toxic to aquatic life and cause those adverse effects, both on survival, growth, and reproduction. It can also cause a decline in brain function, enzyme activity, blood chemistry, and metabolism in aquatic life. For example, it can impact a fish's sense of smell, which is what they depend on for food and migration and avoiding predators. So it is an issue, and is something that needs to be addressed in those marinas where the water quality, the standards are being exceeded. So the regional water quality control boards in California are the leading regulatory agencies to help address dissolved copper issues. Total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, which is a common term you'll hear me say throughout this presentation, those are limits that set how much copper can be released into the water bodies. So these high copper levels are particularly an issue in Southern California, and especially in areas where the marinas are somewhat enclosed, reducing circulation, and if you have a high number of boats. And so the more boats that you have, the more copper anti-fouling paint is being used, and the more copper that's being released into the water. And then you couple that with an enclosed harbor that's not getting a lot of flow through from the ocean, and that copper's just staying there and accumulating. So the marinas right now that are of particular concern with the TMDLs for copper include Marina Del Rey, which you see there in the image, and you can see how how enclosed it is and how that may impact the circulation to remove copper from the harbor. And then you also have Shelter Island Yacht Basin in San Diego County, who has a TMDL for copper and has had one for a while. And then Newport Bay in Orange County, who's in the process of getting their TMDL established right now. As I mentioned, I work with LA County on the Marina Del Rey Toxics TMDL, so we'll be focusing on that one a little. And to give you an overview of those water quality regulations, the dissolved copper TMDL is included in their Toxics TMDL that was updated in 2014. So it's almost been 10 years now. The main source of copper identified in that TMDL is the boat bottom paints, with 94% estimated to be coming from just the passive leaching of copper off the boat paints. And then it's about 6% from in-water hull cleaning activities. So there's quite a difference there, but both are identified as sources. For Marina Del Rey, the regulated parties or the responsible parties that are being held by this TMDL include not just the County of Los Angeles that manages the marina activities, and not just the anchorages themselves, but also all the boat owners in Marina Del Rey. And so this makes it a big issue for the boating community because they're named as a responsible party in the TMDL. This TMDL has a deadline to meet the water quality reduction by 2024. So that is an 85% reduction in copper levels compared to the 2014 levels. So that's a significant reduction in copper over those 10 years. And we're coming up on that date right now. But the good news is that the TMDL is being reopened, and we had a kickoff meeting for that in October. So that TMDL will be reconsidered, and some of the studies that we've been doing in Marina Del Rey are going to be considered for potentially updating the water quality requirements, and hopefully the schedule will be extended as well, is our hope. Over the last several years, LA County has been coming up with different copper reduction strategies that they could implement and show the boating community different ways to help reduce copper and alternatives to using high leaching copper paints. There are three primary strategies that we want to highlight here. The first being, of course, paint conversion. And so if you have you're using a copper paint, if you convert to a non-copper paint or a non-biocide, as in a non-toxic paint, that would significantly reduce the copper levels, of course. That would eliminate your boat's copper contribution. And then there's also switching to a low leach rate copper paint. And I'll touch on this a bit later, but there has been a trend towards the lower leach rate copper paints, and that just has come through regulations. And so that helps, but it's not going to bring the water quality all the way to where it needs to be. In the middle, you see there hull cleaning BMPs. So and those are best management practices. As I mentioned, a portion of the copper contribution is coming from in-water hull cleaning activities. So that is something where if the divers are practicing best management practices, that'll help reduce the amount of copper that's coming off the paints when they're being cleaned. So it's a portion of what's contributing to the problem, and every little bit counts. So what the county did was in 2018, established an ordinance that requires that any hull cleaners practicing in-water hull cleaning in Marina del Rey undergo a certification for best management practices. And so that's been a very positive program in Marina del Rey and has helped with educating the public and the divers on ways to clean the hulls in a way that will not contribute to the pollution. And then the last strategy there is separating the boat hull from the water itself. And that includes using boat lifts or in-water dry docks that create a barrier so that the either you don't need an anti-fouling paint because when your boat is at the slip, it is now lifted out of the water or separated from the water. Or at the very least, you're not leaching your copper paint into the water while it is at the slip because you have that barrier. And this graphic here shows you the copper concentrations over time in Marina del Rey Harbor. And that red line there is the water quality standard for dissolved copper. And that's a statewide standard in marine environments. And that's 3.1 micrograms per liter. The blue dots are the measured, the monitoring in Marina del Rey Harbor. And you can see those are significantly over that water quality standard. The black line is showing the median, which is 7.8 micrograms per liter. And you can start to see a kind of a trend that's moving down from 2017 to 2022. And so our hope in looking at this is that the dissolved copper concentrations are decreasing. And that could, though, have a lot to do with the different regulations that the Department of Pesticide Regulation has released. So it is now the higher leach rate copper paints are no longer allowed, and the norm is the lower leach rate copper paints. So that has helped reduce the copper levels some, as well as hopefully some of the other best management practices that boaters and the county have been implementing in Marina del Rey. But you can see it's still significantly over that 3.1 micrograms per liter. So, you know, there's been progress, but it's not getting us all the way to where we need to be. All right, so that's a little overview of the copper problem and the regulations and the setting in Marina del Rey Harbor in particular. One of the strategies that I mentioned there was paint conversion. And so the Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbors implemented a study to look at non-biocide hull paints. So non-biocide hull paints are non-toxic and are not very common among the boating community. but they have been proposed as this great solution because they don't have toxins. They aren't replacing copper with a different biocide, and that it would be great if they could work. So the county wanted to take a look at these non-biocide paints that are available and test them out to see if they are effective. And by doing so, hopefully be able to show the boating community those results and help inform their decisions when they go to select what kind of paint they want on their boat. So we call this the non-biocide hull paint study, pilot study. We have done 2 to date. And so this is the first study here. It started in 2017 and went through 2019. And it was intended to evaluate non-biocide hull paint effectiveness and to support the conversion to non-biocide hull paints, as I mentioned. The study started with looking at the different non-biocide hull paints that had been studied in the past, so previous papers, and making a list of those and contacting the manufacturers to get more information. Unfortunately, a lot of those non-biocide hull paints had already been either modified or removed from the market. So there was a limited amount of non-biocide hull paints to look at. We did interviews with the hull paint companies of those paints that were out there and got information on, what are the application requirements? How much does the paint cost? What are the cleaning requirements? What is the paint? We tried to get as much as we could on what's the paint made out of and the active ingredients. So we collected all of that. And then we also went and talked to the boatyards about these paints and asked, what is their experience with these paints? Did they have any concerns about applying them? And went together took all this information and ended up using 4 different non-biocide hull paints in our study. 2 from Hull Speed, 1 from Ceramcoat, and 1 from Intersleek. And with those 4 paints, selected 17 county-owned vessels to convert from copper to non-biocide hull paints. And we did this conversion from about April to summer of 2018 to get those boats converted, and then monitored the paint performance over the next several months as part of the study. You can see there, those are the 3 brands, examples of what the hulls looked like after 1 week of cleaning. After cleaning, the hulls were cleaned every 2 weeks, which was the norm for this whole cleaning company, and in Marina del Rey. Performance tracking included diver hull cleaning effort assessment. And so when they'd clean the hull every 2 weeks, they'd do an assessment of how vigorous cleaning and the performance of the paint at that time. Then also weekly, we had the dive company go out and assess the fouling and paint condition. So they were cleaned every 2 weeks, but those images are after 1 week. And so the paint would not be cleaned for another week after that. The fouling level and the hull paint condition used a scale 1 to 5, and the diver would note 1 to 5 what they felt like those the fouling level and the hull paint condition were when they'd go out to clean the boat. So we did the monitoring itself from August to October in 2018. And so it was a few months. And as I mentioned, weekly, the divers were going out there to assess the condition. They took photos, and we have those all documented in a report as well. We also assessed the costs of these paints. So there is the initial conversion cost, which we tracked, which includes purchasing the paint as well as converting from copper to non-biocide, which involves stripping the copper paint from the boat hull. We assessed the lifespan of the paint. So unfortunately, because the study was only a few months, we couldn't tell if these paints would last as long as the manufacturers were saying that they would. So they may say this paint will last 10 years before you need to repaint it, but we couldn't have a study lasting 10 years. So we do have some information in our report about what was assumed the lifespan of the paint, but that does play into cost considerations when selecting an alternative paint. And then the last one there, the hull cleaning cost and frequency of hull cleaning. Some of the paints did not perform as well after 2 weeks. It seemed like they needed to be cleaned more frequently. And those are the hard non-biocides in particular. And then the soft non-biocide, though, after 2 weeks was still in pretty good condition. So we were thinking maybe it could go longer without needing to be cleaned. And then the less that you're having to clean their hull, the less overall cost you'll have over the lifespan of the paint. In general, we found that the soft non-biocide tended to rank better on all the performance criteria, but the issue with this one was that it did have a higher capital cost. It was much more complicated of an application, so there was a little feedback from the boatyards about that issue. And then also there were these unanswered questions about the properties of the paint. So this was a foul release paint, and there was limited information available as far as what that meant and if there was anything to be of concern with that type of paint being used. And we didn't want to make any specific recommendations out to the boating community, and you wouldn't want to have all 4,000 boats changing to the same paint anyway. So we did have those as potential next steps to look at what are the properties and whether there's additional information about like the cleaning requirements of these paints. We completed a second study in 2021 to 2022 to look at some of the questions that we had as part of the first study. And in particular, the cleaning needs of these paints and the long-term effectiveness of the paints and the economic feasibility. And so this paint study included monitoring over a full year so that we could get the full seasons of weather conditions, and included modifying the frequency of hull cleaning according to what the paint itself needed. The county painted 4 different county-owned vessels with 4 new paints. One of them Sea Speed, one Coval Marine, and then there were 2 trial paints that weren't on the market yet that we were hoping would show some similarities to Intersleek there. We assessed the paints over a year, as I mentioned, and adjusted those cleaning techniques. There's a bunch of weird, neat photos coming from that study. As I mentioned, there were 2 trial paints. One of those paints during the study was discontinued. The company did not like the performance and was taking it off their list, so we stopped monitoring it. We were also finding it was not performing well. The final 3 paints there, we had the first one is a soft non-biocide and the other 2 are hard non-biocides. We had the dive company go out and clean these every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what they thought was needed for the paint, as well as adjust and document what kind of cleaning techniques they were using. And they looked at fouling rate, cleaning effort, and coating condition like the previous study. So overall, looking at the 2 studies that we've done, there's unfortunately no clear effective non-biocide paint. The ones that did well tended to have their own issues. And as we went through these studies, we also found that the formulations were changing because the companies are still trying to find the best way to approach the non-biocide paint formulas. The hard non-biocides, while they seem more non-toxic, they also require much more cleaning because they don't have any anti-fouling properties in them. They're hard, so you can clean them aggressively, but that also has its own impacts. And some boaters do not necessarily want to be cleaning their boat every week. So, and in talking with the boatyards, we've noted that it is difficult for them to support any of these paints when they don't have the experience with them and have not seen them do well. The boatyards are asked by the boaters what paint to use, and if they don't feel confident in the paint, they're not going to want to recommend it, and which puts a barrier up to actually getting some more of these paints out there and being used by the community. So with the conclusion of this study, the county is still looking to try new non-biocide paints on their boats. It's just, we haven't found the right one yet, unfortunately, which I know is not what this group wanted to hear. All right, and then coming out to just closing out with some of the alternatives here. Low leach rate copper paints, I mentioned before, Department of Pesticide regulations set a limit at 9.5 micrograms per centimeter squared per day for recreational vessels in July 2018. And so that has helped reduce copper levels in marinas because now the higher leach rate copper paints are not available. We did put together a sheet where we, for the boating community, that lists the low leach rate copper paints that are on the market, as well as their leach rate, and have that organized by leach rate. So when a boater goes to get their boat painted, they can look at this sheet and select one of the lower leach rate paints. And that would be helpful in itself. And so the more that these paints get used, the more feedback we can hear on how they are, because some of the low leach rate copper paints though are ablative, and maybe that's not as good, or maybe they have a much shorter lifespan, and so they're getting painted more frequently. So, again, we want it, the more people can try these paints, the more information we can find out about them. And also some have higher VOCs, which are not allowed in different areas. In addition to the non-biocides that we were looking at and the low leach rate copper paints, there are other biocide paints that are non-copper, zinc, organic biocides, combinations of those, slime release, as we mentioned, and then also some companies are coming out with ion fields that create slick barriers that help with reducing the fouling instead of leaching copper or other chemicals into the water. So as the market continues to develop and the drivers are towards finding solutions, we hope that there will be new paints out there to try. And the other alternative that we've been looking at in the past is just, instead of the paint and switching the paint over from copper, would just be separating the hull from the water using a boat lift or an in-water dry dock. And so LA County purchased 2 in-water dry docks back in 2018 and had those at Anchorage 47, their county-owned anchorage, and was looking at the lifespan cost savings by putting a boat in one of these, and found that fouling under the boat in-water dry dock did not cause the device to sink. It was still working properly. We put an educational sign out, developed a report, and did a report back after 3 years. And so that's all up on our website if you want to read about it. We found, though, that without having a company locally that can help with maintenance if there's an issue, it makes it really difficult to promote these and encourage these more widespread. In summary, no silver bullet. Diverse solutions are needed for this problem. Ongoing assessments of the new paints, alternatives, and technologies are needed. Studies to investigate what the risk is to the marine life and what levels are needed, as well as ongoing collaboration with the boatyards, the boaters, the hull cleaners, the manufacturers, and the regulators. It's a problem that we all have together, and it needs to be a team effort. With that, this is my information, as well as Emiko Eames, who's not here today, but she's leading these efforts at Department of Beaches and Harbors. And then we also have up there our Beaches and Harbors Toxics TMDL webpage, so you can find out a ton of information there. We've been updating it with all of our outreach flyers and reports as well. What questions can I answer?
Thank you, Brenda. Great information. I'm also going to include in the chat really quickly before we go over the questions, a link to a publication that we developed actually with Beaches and Harbors, the Port of San Diego, and the Department of Pesticide Regulations, among others, about this topic, which is very useful. And I'm going to take the first question in the order that I receive it. So the first one is from Todd Messerly. Sorry if I not pronouncing your last name properly. So Brenda, he says, is ultrasonic anti-fouling systems being considered? These systems are a great assist in reducing needed diver cleaning.
So we have not looked at ultrasonic systems yet. So that is something that we can add to our list of things to consider. And you mentioned that this is for cleaning. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So he says these systems are a great assist in reducing needed diver cleaning.
Oh,
And you can find also the question in case you want in the chat is the ultrasonic anti-fouling system.
thank you. Yeah. So we can add
Okay.
that to our list.
Yes, so then Gary, and then I'll take Alicia. So Gary, Judd is saying, Brenda, is there a year or years and brands that have been shown to be more prevalent for the high leach rate copper or biocide in the whole paint? That's the first question, so I'll let you to respond and then I go over the second.
So just so I understand, so is there a brand?
Year or years and brands that have been shown to be more prevalent for the high leach rate copper or biocide in the whole paint?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that one.
Okay, then he says it is just paint.
Maybe you
or
could provide a clarification.
Yes, go ahead, Gary, if you want just to unmute yourself, if you can, or just type in like, just to clarify the question. Okay, let me just read his second. Okay, go ahead, Gary.
So is there a year or years basically that have been shown, like historically, that have the high leach rate for the copper or biocides versus others?
So years where there have been higher levels of copper in the water, is that what you're asking?
So like the boat builders and whatnot, if there's, say you've got a houseboat that's been on a certain body of water for 20 years or more, is there a time frame where they were more likely to use that high copper or high biocide leaching, kind of like lead-based paint in the old houses?
Okay, well, I don't know if there were any specific years, but I do know the high leach rate copper paints were the most common paints until this became an issue, and the Department of Pesticide Regulation had to start addressing it by making the requirement that no new high leach rate copper paints could be registered with them, and that went into effect in 2018.
Alicia, go ahead and unmute yourself and welcome, and then we'll go over to the other questions in the chat.
Hi, Vivian. Hi, Brenda. Brenda, we've met before. I have been in Marina Del Rey for about 17 years, so I'm very familiar with this TMDL. I'm curious what the focus of the reopener is specifically looking at. Is it looking at a change to the reduction amount that we are required to hit? Or is it a change to the allowable amount of copper in a man-made marina with this kind of low circulation?
Yes, to both. So it is, the reopener will incorporate the results from a site-specific objective study. And that study found that we could increase the target, the water quality target, from the 3.1 up to above 4. And so in doing that, they'll incorporate that into the TMDL and then also change the load allocation requirements associated with that.
Got it. And is there still a discussion of the in the early days of this TMDL, they were talking about dredging up sediment in the entire harbor, which seems like it would actually put more copper and other bad things up into the water column. Is that still being discussed?
Yes, so the dredging in the harbor is associated with a different part of the toxics TMDL, which is the contaminated sediment. And that is still moving forward. And but there are some preliminary studies to see the best approach of handling dredging the sediment and capping it. And it's not anticipated that that would then bring copper up into the water column.
Okay, there is dredging happening at the, we have some bad shoaling on the north and south entrances of the harbor that the dredging will be happening either later this year or early 2024. Are there plans to do testing to see if that does impact the copper levels?
I'm not aware of any plans, but I can definitely circle back with you on that after talking with someone else.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Now I'm going to go and read. I see the order would be Kristen, Cleve, Dave, and then Gary. So Kristen, in the chat, she doesn't have a microphone, says, we at Sun Harbor Marina are near Shelter Island in San Diego and are wondering what the next steps for tracking TMDL excuse me, are. I know a study just finished up recently and we no longer required to keep track of bottom paint of our incoming boaters. Will this be coming back in the future? Is there a plan for the Shelter Island area TMDL? I don't know, Brenda, if you know about that.
So I'm not involved with that TMDL, but I do talk to the team that is, and so they are coordinating with the regional board about that TMDL as their deadline has passed, and so they're working closely with them to find out the best approach moving forward.
Yeah, and I know Kristen, they were able to fulfill all the requirements from the TMDL, but I think exactly what Brenda is saying is they're on the works to see what the next steps would be. So more to come. And it says then, hold on for a second, Kristen, and then Dave made a comment really quickly. Thank you for a very honest report. Please mention that Washington State and Port of San Diego, Shelter Island are continue to work together. So let me just go back to Cleve, and then we'll have Gary. Cleve.
Thanks, Vivian. Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah, Brenda, you mentioned that DPR had essentially recommended some low copper paints. That was in 2018. And in fact, since 2018, it has been illegal to use any kind of paint besides the low copper paints. Also, all of the paint manufacturers acknowledge that after 5 years, there is no copper left in the paint. So that means that since 2018, or 5 years since 2018, there are no high copper paints left on boats anywhere in California. So that's sort of important. And then you also mentioned that the 3.1 standard was statewide. Well, don't know if you've taken a look at the site-specific study that was done in San Francisco about 20 years ago that resulted in the copper standard in San Francisco Bay to be changed, raised to 8.4, I believe it was, which is a little higher than the median that you've got there in Marina del Rey. So I think it would be helpful to look at that.
Thank you. Yeah, I did misspeak there. The base copper requirement is the 3.1, but definitely important because yes, we were going through the same thing with the site-specific objective study for the harbor as well. Right.
And also a lot of the studies that you've been doing on the various alternative types of hull coatings, you say you've been talking to the people at the Port of San Diego who conducted a lot of those same tests a long time ago. So you know, hopefully we're not duplicating a lot of stuff that's already been done there. The other thing is with the TMDL in San Diego, that TMDL was initiated in 2005, and the goal was to achieve, you know, the 75% reduction in copper discharge by the end of 2022. That is now a year old, pretty much. And the results in San Diego didn't make very much difference. They did not achieve the reduction in copper loading by the end of 2022. And so now the requirement to sample the types of count hulls and see what kind of paint they've got, that investigative order has been lifted by the regional board in San Diego. And so now the regional board is taking a look at some alternative approach to water quality. And so, you know, I'm certainly hopeful that you guys are talking to them. They are, you know, several years ahead of you and might save you an awful lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, we actually have a reoccurring call with them monthly. So to share ideas, because as you mentioned, they are ahead of us. They've had their TMDL longer. And so we've definitely tried to learn what we can from them and take it from there. So I appreciate you also mentioning the update for our other audiences that wanted to hear a little bit about Shelter Island's TMDL. So thank you.
Thank you, Cleve and Brenda. So moving along, we have a couple of more questions. So Gary disappeared. Then it would be John. John is saying, would expanding the use of paints designed for aluminum hulls be part of a solution? Interlux Trilux 33 is TBT free, not sure about copper content.
Great. So we are looking at all the different paints that are out there. We can't test them all though, but you know, there are a ton of paints out there, so they're all part of the alternatives to copper paints.
Okay, great. And then Shayna Rappaport, she's with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Did either of the whole paint studies track boat usage during the study? As some non-biocide paints are designed to work best when boats are used frequently, enabling fouling organisms to slide off when in motion. This seems like an important factor to consider in evaluating effectiveness of the paint.
Yes, thanks, Shayna. Yeah, we did track what the boat usage was for the different paints. We only had control over using county-owned vessels. So the vessels that we used in the first paint study were beaches and harbors, sheriff and fire department boats. And so we did document what the usage was, but we couldn't change it because those are used for certain purposes. And then same for the second study, we documented what the usage was, but didn't have a lot of control over making changes to that. So I definitely agree that a great study would be, you know, playing around with the usage and the paint to figure out what the best combination would be for making it the most effective.
And you have a follow-up question, and then we'll take the last one and then move on. She says, with changing water quality in Marina del Rey, in part due to implementation of TMDLs for other pollutants, how will the potential site-specific objective be verified to be protective of aquatic life once it is adopted? That's the first question, and then I'll ask you a second question.
How will it be verified? I do not have an answer to that question at this time, but I can circle back after talking with the team.
And she asked, is the county concerned that the site-specific objective may create a moving target rather than certainty for the Marina del Rey community?
Do you want to expand on that concern?
And go ahead, Shayna. Are you there? Okay, let's take the other question from Themis. Have you considered the time that would take to replace all the copper? Hold on for a sec. All the copper, hold on, it moves so fast here. All the copper fouling paints from all the boats in Marina, assuming that their life span is 3 years. The cycle will never end with the availability of boatyard resources to paint 6,000 boats just in Marina del Rey on an ongoing rate.
Right. So the typical copper paints are typically replaced every 3 years or repainted after a few years. And we do have 2 boat yards in Marina del Rey. And so it is assumed that after a certain amount of time, those paints have been repainted. But there are about 4,700 boats in Marina del Rey. And we wouldn't want to be able to paint all the boats at the same time. It just, it would take some time. But we're not proposing that all the boats get painted to non-biocide paints at this point.
Okay, and then Shayna, in the chat is specifying by saying the changing water quality, the SSO could change. The above comment was explanatory for my previous question regarding the potential SSO.
Yes, with the site's SSO, meaning the site-specific objective study. So with that change in what that objective is, that would change the 3.1 to a slightly higher target. We are expecting that will go into the new TMDL, and in such that will change the target reduction that the boating community is aiming for, which will still be a significant amount of copper reduction regardless. So that is the path forward there. I don't know if that answers your question, Shayna, though.
Okay, so we are running a little bit behind the schedule, even though we are doing okay here. But Brenda, if you can please stop sharing your screen, that would be fantastic. And then Shayna just mentioned one more thing before we move into other topic. For reference, my previous question was if the changing water quality could result in an SSO that changes and thus provides uncertainty.
In a site-specific objective that changes, providing uncertainty. I'm not sure how to respond to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's an evolving topic, and that's why we bring to you the latest and greatest. And I know, Brenda, you can just go back to your team, and if you have any way to, if you want to get back to the group, I'm happy to share that response via email to the entire audience, if applicable. Okay. Thank you, Brenda, so much. Again, the email you will be receiving will contain Brenda's as well as the other speakers' contact information. And now we're going to thank you, Shayna, for being here and for asking the questions. It's a learning process, as you well know here. So we're going to go over the last question, the last presentation, sorry, from Kendall Soriano with the Bay Foundation and Diana Fu with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership. They are both our Clean Vessel Act grantees for both Northern and Southern California. So Kendall and Diana, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I'll just go ahead and start. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Fu, and I'm an environmental planner here at the San Francisco Estuary Partnership. I am one of the team members working on the Clean Vessel Act program and one half of the California team. We are the Northern California half, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Kendall, to talk about her end.
Thanks, Diana. Hi, everyone. My name is Kendall Soriano. I'm a project manager at the Bay Foundation. We are the other half of the California Clean Vessel Act funded team. I represent, along with my team, represent Southern California and help to manage our boater education program.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kendall. And today we're going to be talking about pump outs. So pump outs up and close, influencing use and analyzing the economics. I will be giving the first half of the presentation about the economics. So first, I can talk about a report that recently came out looking into the economic impacts of installing sewage pump outs. The study was funded through the Division of Boating and Waterways, and our organization, the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, served as a pass-through for funds to hire a consultant. There's several important things I want to note about this report. It's specific to California, where boating is year-round, especially in the southern part of the state. Data collected from boaters came from coastal boaters, and most boaters surveyed had boats over 25 feet and are more likely to have a head on board. And last thing I wanted to highlight was that many marinas don't charge for pump out services and many operate 24/7. So for this study, we wanted to answer two questions. The first being, what are the economic impacts of installing a sewage pump out on a marina's revenues? And two, if there are benefits, can we use this information to entice marinas into installing pump outs and also utilizing pump out grants? The study was conducted in two stages. The first stage interviewed marina managers, and the second stage involved gathering surveys from over 600 boaters who were asked about their spending habits when they go out to the marina and on the water. The surveys were promoted through email and social media. So for the first part of the interviews with marina managers who had pump outs on site, we reached out to 8 of our friendlies or marina managers who were actively supportive of other tasks we have conducted through the Clean Vessel Act programs. They were asked the following questions that you see on this slide. What was the initial motivation for installing a pump out? Tell us a bit about your experience with the pump out. What types of boaters use the unit? Average annual costs for maintenance, and is there anything you'd change about your pump out? None of the interviewees in this category viewed pump out as a direct source of revenue, and many mentioned that the costs of installing and maintaining units did not necessarily bring in revenue through fees charged to use units. Most marinas don't track their pump out maintenance expenses, but 2 interviewees estimated that upkeep was about $1,000 a year. Interviewees also mentioned that boaters typically don't come to their marinas specifically to pump out, but if they did, they would often stop by the marina store and purchase goods and other services at the marina. The consultants who did the study also spoke with 16 marina managers that did not have pump outs on site. They were asked the following 3 questions. Why don't you have a pump out? Would this grant funding make you more willing to install a pump out? And are you aware of state grant funding for installation or operation and maintenance? For the first question asking why a specific location didn't have a pump out, interviewees expressed similar answers. Either that there were already pump outs nearby, there was not enough demand or space for a pump out, that there was a pump out company that pumps out their tenant boats already, or that the cost of maintenance was too high. Interestingly, less than half were aware of grant funding to assist with the costs of installing and maintaining a pump out. And the ones who did know about available grants said they were confused about grant requirements. Of the 8 interviewees out of the 16 who were unaware, only 4 said that they would utilize grant funding. For the second part of the study, the consultants advertised an online survey to California boaters via social media and email. We received 629 responses, and the survey asked the following questions. What kind of pump out do you use? Is there a pump out at your home marina? How important to you is a pump out at your home marina? Do you visit other marinas? And this question is trying to understand if there are transient boaters to utilize services not available at their home marina. Question number 5, how important is it that those marinas have a pump out? How much do you spend when visiting another marina? And lastly, do you travel to other marinas specifically to pump out? And if so, how much do you spend on other services? From these questions, the consultants were able to identify 2 groups. Transient boaters in general and boaters that specifically go to another marina to pump out. So we dug a little deeper into the general versus transient boater questions and found the following results. From the general pump out questions, we found that the stationary pump out was most popular. 72% of respondents have a pump out at their home marina, and that pump out availability is important to these boaters. For transient boater questions, we found that 82% of respondents visit other marinas. Pump outs are less important to these boaters. Fuel and restaurants are the biggest spending category, and few boaters visit specifically to pump out, and they tend to spend less. Now with these takeaways and before coming to findings and conclusions, I wanted to mention a few caveats. We had built upon previous reports and resources such as the California Vessel Waste Disposal Plan, the Boater Sewage Disposal Survey Report, and public records of boat registration by county courtesy of the California DMV. It's important to note that we didn't just go out and hire a consultant to ask marina managers and boaters questions, and that especially important information was aggregated across counties. So even good numbers don't tell the whole story. And from this study, we were able to identify some key findings. First, that direct costs often exceeded direct revenue. Potential revenue depends on location and nearby pump outs. Nearby pump outs discourage installation. Pump outs can increase demand for slips. Marinas with pump outs receive additional $2,208 per guest slip per year. That pump outs specific visits bring in an estimated 14.5 million statewide. And that additional revenue expected to be earned by a marina that installs a pump out varies by location and the extent to which other publicly accessible pump outs already exist in the area. For a marina near a major boating center that does not already have a pump out, installing a pump out could increase a marina's annual revenue by $48,325. And last but not least, the consultants provided the following recommendations. They identified and recommended that the state needed a total of 70 pump outs that target counties and boating areas, to target counties and boating areas that are deficient of pump outs, to target marinas that already provide other services, and score marinas higher that don't have nearby public pump outs, and lastly, to provide direct outreach to marinas that fit this profile. If you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to read the report. You can find that either on DBW's website, or you can scan the QR code on your screen to read the whole report. Thank you for all of your time, and I'd like to pass the mic to our friends at the Bay Foundation.
Thanks, Diana, for that wonderful presentation. I encourage everyone to go read that report linked here on the screen. If you could go to the next slide, Diana, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to switch gears for the last part of our presentation and discuss the Bay Foundation's work with recreational boaters and our pilot study in Marina del Rey utilizing community-based social marketing, or CBSM. So CBSM is a social science that's used to foster sustainable behavior change, and it's most effective when carried out at the community level and also involving direct contact with people. Next slide, please, Diana. Thank you. So it's carried out in 5 general steps that are listed out here that I'm going to be breaking down further into this presentation. So our first step consists of selecting a behavior to target within our pilot. So we chose to target the proper disposal of boat sewage via stationary pump out units. So we selected this behavior because we believed it would be impactful to recreational boaters and also improve water quality, especially within the marinas. With this behavior in mind, we needed to understand the motivations of boaters in Marina del Rey and their perceived barriers and benefits, essentially the why and why not to using pump outs. So to answer this question, we conducted barrier and benefit research in which we developed 2 in-person surveys. And in 3 days in Marina del Rey, we were able to engage with 68 boaters, both with and without holding tanks. And as you can see here on the slide, over 20% reported dumping their sewage overboard as their main disposal method. Boaters outlined their perceived barriers as sanitation, long wait times, and hesitancy towards pump out operability. The benefits that were mentioned included water quality, reducing pollution, and aquatic life. So with these perceived barriers and benefits outlined, we then needed to understand the information to determine our outreach strategy and the types of behavior change tools. So as you can see here, we organized our data into a table. The barriers and benefits that we found were broken down into 4 categories: infrastructure, means and access, myths and misconceptions, and values. We determined our outreach strategies, or ways to use these behavior change tools to directly engage with voters and address those barriers and benefits during the pilot. So we discussed things like the use of flyers, pictures, signage, social media, and even testimonials. And ultimately, out of the many engagement strategies that were mentioned, we decided to implement 2 key strategies within our pilot. So firstly, the distribution of flyers, pictured here on the slide. The flyers had images of pump out units and vessel sewage disposal resources, like the Pump Out Nav app, and also had a call to action there at the top of the flyer as well. Secondly, we utilized in-person tabling campaigns to gather commitments from voters. This involved the creation of a commitment board here on the right of the slide, and signed commitment cards as well. These were displayed up at dock doors. So the commitment component was intended to increase motivation by enhancing self-perception and fostering those positive social norms, while the flyer was intended to address barriers like access, functionality. And to this, we provided a QR code to download the Pump Out Nav app, which is a resource for locating pump out stations. So in short, our pilot goals were to decrease the amount of sewage discharged into local waterways, while also increasing the use of stationary pump outs, and the download, use, and knowledge around the Pump Out Nav app. So to measure this, we tracked 2 metrics. So the first, implementation metrics, were defined as the number of flyers distributed to boaters, and also the number of commitments made by boaters with holding tanks. And secondly, our behavioral metrics were defined as, firstly, the change in pump out runtimes, the change in pump out usage, which was measured through log sheets posted at pump out stations in both Marina del Rey, our treatment site, and Port of Long Beach, our control site. And thirdly, our last behavioral metric was defined as the change in use of Pump Out Nav app. And that was tracked through the number of downloads by city to capture use in and around Marina del Rey Harbor and also the Port of Long Beach. So with these goals and strategies in mind, our CBSM pilot was implemented in Marina del Rey in 3 general data collection steps. So the first is our baseline, or our pre-pilot data collection, followed by our pilot data collection, and then lastly, our post-pilot data collection. So on the slide, you can see kind of what was going on in Marina del Rey. There's some examples of our flyer placements, our commitment board, as well as the written and photo commitments, our tabling set up again, and also the self-reported log sheets that were posted on the actual pump out units themselves. And here is a slide showing some of the sources of our implementation and behavioral metrics. So overall, despite data yielding no correlation in that behavior change, the pilot was really well received among boaters in Marina del Rey, and really meaningful outreach was conducted. The high engagement in commitments was indicative of a strong sense of community and a willingness to engage in the desired behavior. And overall, we learned a lot from this study. So although we found no quantifiable change in that behavior, pilot elements are well placed for future behavior change outreach. So the 2 main recommendations that we took away from this are, firstly, to address infrastructure challenges, and secondly, to collect more specific and granular data. This is a complex behavior, and because we can't be out on the water collecting data on the exact amount of times people are dumping their sewage overboard, it's really helpful to gather specific data in multiple forms. So this is the first time that a community-based social marketing pilot has been done in the Marina del Rey Harbor. And we're really pleased with the learnings, and we're also encouraged to understand more about the sewage disposal habits and the behaviors of recreational boaters. So thank you for taking the time to learn about the world of recreational boat sewage and community-based social marketing. Diana, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. If you have any questions about mine or Diana's presentation, feel free to unmute or reach out to Diana and I over email. So thank you for being here, and thank you to Vivian for hosting us.
Thank you, Kendall and Diana. Great information. And let me get here some questions. So the Coast Guard Auxiliary Jeff Fight is asking about mentioning 25% of boaters in your survey admitted to dumping sewage overboard as their main method of managing their waste. Where are they dumping it? Offshore from LA-LB area outside of the 3 nautical miles? That's the first question. So Kendall, if you want just to respond.
Yeah, so our study didn't define exactly where folks are dumping overboard. However, like Georgia, my colleague here mentioned, that we assumed they were legal dumps past that 3 mile mark. And there was potentially one or very few boaters that we engaged with that admitted to dumping illegally.
Thank you. And then do you have any similar insight into this behavior in the Bay Delta estuary?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can pass it to Diana too. We work primarily in Southern California, and our pilot focused really in Southern California, and specifically Marina del Rey Harbor.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. We haven't done a similar study in the Northern California region.
Yeah, and Jeff, these are expensive studies, as you can imagine, because it requires a lot of planning and communication back and forth and follow up with boaters. So it makes it really hard, even though they are fantastic studies. But that's the comment that happens with education, that you need more resources to do these kind of studies. That's why as a team and in the statewide program as well, we try to angle the education by asking some of the questions, for example, via the boater key questionnaire, et cetera, and just knowing, because a lot of boaters feel that sewage, unlike oil, is not a big of a problem. So that's why we continue with the education to try to make sure that people understand that sewage is pretty bad and is not okay. Even though we also know that most of the boaters are good stewards of the environment, and they are just trying to identify how to do things right and where to properly do it right. Any additional questions? And again, in the email follow-up that you will be receiving later on, you will find also the link to the economic study. The community-based social marketing study is still not up in our website yet. It will be soon. So you will have that information there as well. So I wanted just to know if anybody else has any additional questions to not only Kendall and Diana at this point, but if you have anything else that you forgot probably before. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Thank you, Alicia, for your help and support and always being present here. I'm just checking the cameras just to see if I don't see any hand on, and I don't think I have it. Diana, if you can just stop sharing your screen, please. Thank you so much. So, well, we are right on time. This is just fantastic. I want to, on behalf of the 2 agencies that I represent, I wanted to say thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us in this educational meeting, and specifically to the speakers for the amount of preparation and the great information you're sharing with us today. I'm going to ask everybody to please take seriously 2 minutes of your time to please help us filling out the evaluation form that I'm posting right now in the chat. So you can help us, again, to try to decide how future meetings and the topics is very, seriously, it's just 2 minutes of your time. And I'm recording, as you know, these meetings. These will be posted in our YouTube channel. A lot of people who couldn't come will be able to continue to watch this important information. And I want to thank everybody for being here and wish you and all your organizations, staff, family, fantastic holidays, a fantastic 2024. And we look forward to continue to working with all of you in all of our programs. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a fantastic afternoon. Don't forget, please, to fill out the evaluation form. Thank you, everybody.